Great. So welcome and have a good afternoon. I have a question, but I need the slides, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Does anybody know this man? Anyone here in the room? Okay, I introduce him as the first panelist. This guy's name is Algorithmic. For sure, I spell it completely wrong. And this guy was a mathematician. And he came to Baghdad around the year 820. And he wrote a book on mathematics. And this book was later translated into Latin. And it was quoted as the book that was written by Algorithmic. And that's the book where the name algorithm comes from. And so maybe he is a very important panelist here. And I wanted to let you know that he is the one our topic is named after. We will discuss about algorithms and why they are so important for newsrooms. And we hope that we will have many learnings from these panels, because we have a great round of experts here today, which I want to introduce very shortly. Ingrid Brodnig, hello Ingrid, is an author and a journalist and a digital expert. Recently she wrote 2 books, one on hatred in the internet and one on lies in the internet. She's also a digital champion for Austria for the European Union. Mathew Ingram is the chief digital writer for the Columbia Journalism Review, and he has been covering media and digital for quite a long time for GigaOM and for the Fortune magazine. Christina Elmer is the head of data journalism at Spiegel Online. Spiegel is one of the most important magazines in Germany, and Spiegel Online one of the largest online news operations. And Jeff Larson, he is, until very recently, he was at ProPublica.
Wednesday.
Yeah. And he will tell us later what's next, the new exciting thing. And he has been covering algorithms, and he has been working with algorithms for quite a long time, and he can share very interesting experiences. And ProPublica's work with algorithms is one of the most important, I would say, worldwide, and we have some very interesting topics to discuss that are based on ProPublica's reporting. So welcome to our panel, hello. And my first question is, it's very hard to answer it in short, I'm afraid. My very first question is, how do you work with and about algorithms? What is your professional approach to our topic? And I want to ask Ingrid first.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Hello, everybody. I'm a journalist from Austria, and I write about how technology is shaping society. And one of the things I'm very interested in is also why rather extreme voices are often quite successful online. For example, in Austria, but also in Italy and in other countries, we have quite successful right-wing populists. And often those populists are also very successfully using Facebook and digital tools. So I've written a book, as you mentioned, it's called Lügen im Netz, Lies on the Internet. And it's about fake news, it's about propaganda, and also about populists online. And I think one important aspect is actually anger, it's emotion. So we know that part of the tool set by populists is angry rhetoric. They make people angry. And the interesting thing is, from political scientists, we've known for quite some time that anger is an activating emotion, which means angry people, they are more likely to go vote and give their voice in an election, to go to the ballot. And also angry users, they click more often. Angry users are great users because they give a lot of feedback. And I think this is one important aspect regarding the success of populists. Of course, not the only aspect, that would be too easy. But so this is an idea I've written often about, and I will show you something. Here, yeah. So I think that anger is an important aspect when it comes to the success of populists online. Because first, populists write provocative messages. They make people angry. They make their followers angry, for example, about minorities. And then they make other people angry about their rhetoric. So I guess everybody sometimes gets angry because of populists. And the thing is, I think we live in a digital system where algorithms might help the whole system, because we know some things that are kind of disconcerting. For example, if you use Facebook, and I guess nearly everybody does here, the algorithm decides what you see and what you don't see. And I guess everybody knows this here, but one of the most important aspects, how the algorithm chooses if you see something or if you don't see something, is interaction, is the number of likes, the number of comments, the number of reactions. And so I have this idea that right-wing populists are benefiting from Facebook's algorithm. And I call this effect Facebook or algorithms as a drama machine, because they value drama, they value angry rhetoric when people click, and then when they get a lot of likes, comments, shares, etc., they show this post to even more people. And the funny thing is, to sum it up, I've had this, I've written a lot about this, and just recently, like 2-3 weeks ago, a young data scientist in Germany, he tested this theory, and he really did some research, and he made an analysis of all the German political parties in the Bundestag. And he saw and he tried to find out which different reactions those parties get on Facebook. You see it here. As you all know, I guess, on Facebook you can also click angry, you can click wow, you can click love, you can click sad, and you see a dramatic difference what people click when it comes to right-wing populists. This is the AfD, the German populists. You see more than half of their reactions are angry reactions. And this is a significant difference to every other party. You see similar effects in countries like my own, in Austria. We see that there is a huge difference, and you can measure this difference, which reactions populists, right-wing populists get. And this is, of course, important, because if they get a lot of angry reactions, the algorithm will favor that. We even know that the algorithm, Facebook's algorithm, is valuing reactions higher than the like button. So this is one of the things I'm looking in, and I think this is one of the examples what we can do as journalists. I think we need to ask the questions, which logic does the software have, and what values are part of the software, and are we okay with that? Because I think we should not be okay with such a system.
Thank you. Christina, may I hand over to you? Is this microphone?
I don't think,
Yeah.
Okay, no, sorry. Thanks. We at Spiegel Online, we have many different points of contacts with algorithms, both in our work as workflow tools, for example, and also as subject of investigations and of our reporting. In the data journalism department, we have developed some tools like a number of interactive applications and data-driven infographics that can be produced automatically with automated frameworks in our newsroom, so that we as data journalists do not have to be involved in every single project. And the colleagues can use those applications in their creative sound articles. And in the broader perspective of the newsroom as a whole, we have really many tools that support our work, like the recommendation tools for next reads, for example, like transcription tools, monitoring tools for social media, ad marketing tools, and stuff like that. So we are really, in our workflows, we really have included many algorithms already, and I think this is the same with every newsroom that you might be thinking of. And also, we have investigated some more relevant algorithms together with partners like ProPublica, NGOs in Germany, other media partners, or scientists in Germany, just to focus on the debate on algorithms to foster the demand for transparency, for example, and to find out if there is discrimination bias regarding the outcome of these algorithms, like Facebook, Google, or the central, most important scoring system for private persons in Germany, the Schufa algorithm. We're doing a project right now. Two NGOs, the OKFN and Algorithm Watch in Germany, and together with other media partners, and again, many other partners. So this is also a crucial thing about such investigations, just to team up with as many partners as you can, because these projects are complex and you will need them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have two aspects, reporting on algorithms and working with algorithms. Mathew, you have been reporting on algorithms a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about the focus of your work?
Yeah, I guess it's important to note that I am not a programmer. I don't even really understand how algorithms work, so that's not my focus. I'm trying to learn more about them so that I can figure out how they work. But to me, the most interesting thing is what Ingrid was talking about, how algorithms shape the way we see the world, how they shape the information that we get. What I like to do, which I encourage you to do as well, is to ask what I call civilians, people who don't work in the media, if they know that Facebook filters their newsfeed algorithmically. And over 50% of the people I ask do not know that. So in effect, they're getting a filtered view of the world driven by Facebook's algorithm, but they don't know that. They don't know that Facebook is not showing them certain things. They don't know why Facebook is showing them other things. And they don't know that their emotions, the way they kind of perceive reality is being shaped by that algorithm. And I find that disturbing and fascinating. And I think we need to think more about how that works. I remember Jonah Peretti, who built BuzzFeed, said something fascinating to me, which was people share things online and they engage with them by clicking like or wow or whatever. They share things because they feel a strong emotion. It could be anger, it could be joy, it could be love, it could be fear. They don't share things because they're true. They don't share things because they're factually accurate, unless they're journalists. Most people share things because they feel true. And the algorithm rewards that. The algorithm picks things that trigger a strong emotion. And if you interact with them, that shows the algorithm that you want to see more of that. So if you click on things that make you angry, you're going to see more things that make you angry. If you click on things that are just funny, you're going to see more things that are funny. You're not going to see, the classic example is riots in Ferguson versus people doing the ice bucket challenge. Everybody on Facebook saw the ice bucket and no riots in Ferguson because riots disturb people. Facebook wants you to spend more time on the platform. Lots of the ways they do that is they show you puppy photos and baby photos and so on. And the key point for me is that Facebook, I think, likes to, and lots of technology platforms like to kind of wave at the algorithm as a magic box that, is run by computers. And so computers determine what you see. But algorithms are written by human beings. And human beings have biases. And human beings have even unconscious biases. The way a 20-something white man in Silicon Valley thinks you should see the world is not the way maybe lots of other people think you should see the world. And so those are the people who are designing these algorithms that are shaping the way that billions of people see the world. And so I think that's a huge issue. It's a concern for me. It's something I think we need to deal with and talk about. And so that's why I'm interested in this panel.
So Jeff, if the question is how algorithms shape the world, I think you did quite a lot of work on that. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure. So I've been investigating algorithms since 2010. It all started for me during our decennial census and redistricting. And redistricting in the United States, we redraw our congressional lines to elect representatives. And I noticed how much data political consultants had and how sophisticated they were at drawing the lines to get representatives elected. And we're seeing the outgrowth of that with, you know, the increased strength of our Republican Party in the United States and the increase, the overrepresentation that they have via a process called gerrymandering. I moved on to political targeting and email targeting in 2012, covering the Obama and Romney campaign and the ways in which they were using data to target, to politically target their messages via email campaigns. And also, one of the very first uses of Facebook was during that campaign when Obama sent out a message saying, here are all your friends we don't think are gonna vote, tell them to vote. And that was micro-targeting on a scale that, you know, like on a Cambridge Analytica level scale. Then I sort of delved into the top secret world and reported on the NSA via the Snowden documents for a couple of years. But in 2016, my colleague and I, Julie Angwin, had sort of a realization that algorithms are not just Facebook, are not just Google, are not just Twitter, that they're increasingly used as scoring systems to score people's lives. And also there are historical algorithms that people haven't really recognized as being algorithms. So I'm gonna point to two examples of that. One is a story we did about risk assessments. So in Broward County in Florida, they were using this risk assessment, which basically when you get arrested or picked up by the police, they score you, they ask you 137 questions as to, some of them are like, how often do you call your mother? Another one is, if you're poor, is it okay to steal? And they output a score of how likely it is that you are going to you know, get picked up again for another crime. What we found is this score had an incredible false positive rate for African Americans. So half the time, it predicted that African Americans were going to be guilty of another crime when they actually weren't. And for white people, it was only 23% it was wrong. This is a clear bias in this score that can't be explained by the type of crime they committed, how many priors they had, how many, you know, whether they were young or old or male or female, but had a clear racial division. Some researchers recently found, and also it was terrible at predicting. Some researchers recently found, they asked people with no criminal justice experience to score the people in our data set, and they found that this algorithm was no better than just general human judgment. Actually is accurate. The other one that we did, which was a follow-up to this, which is another thing about how algorithms always use, how algorithms are so pervasive in our lives. We did an investigation into car insurance. And car insurance, people don't normally think of as an algorithm, but it is a risk score. Insurers use a number of factors, you know, sometimes often hundreds of factors, to guess how much they're going to have to pay out when they sign a premium. We had no idea what all of those factors are, but we could measure, based on the average rate of collisions in a particular zip code, we could measure how different people were getting priced different insurance. And what we found is in Chicago, we found 30 out of 31 companies were charging African American neighborhoods twice as much when they had the same underlying risk, when they were equally as risky. Right? There's a clear sort of racial bias going on there. And we also replicated these results in 4 other states. We found it in California, which is the most regulated. We found insurers that were charging up to 25% more for the same car insurance. We found it in Texas, and we found it in Missouri. And we found the same disparate effects here, right? This is an algorithm that is clearly breaking down, that is not treating everyone fairly, but the argument that we got back from the car insurance industry is we use math. This is just math, right? Essentially, right? You know, regulators have never said any of our pricing was predatory or anything like that. We use tried and true algorithms. You can't argue with us. Last year, I used algorithms to track down political ads on Facebook by crowdsourcing an investigation, built a browser extension so that people could scrape, help us scrape Facebook for political ads. And we wrote a bunch of stories with a bunch of folks in Germany, and we're now collecting ads from, I think, like a dozen countries around the world.
Thank you. Do you want to have this question now? Is it important to understand what Jeff was saying, or can we have it for the discussion later?
We can do it later. Out of sheer curiosity, given you spoke.
Whoa. We need a mic.
Oh,
we need a mic. For streaming internet land.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, since you spoke about Broward County, given the number of Latinos, I was wondering if the criminal profiling, what the results were for the Latino community?
Well, I can't remember. I'll send you a link.
If it was significant, given the area of
I can't remember. Latinos are a little bit difficult in the United States because a lot of Latinos identify as white when you ask them what their race is. So like that's always a difficulty in the United States. But I'll send you a link to the white paper.
Okay, thank you. So we see this really are relevant results, and it affects many, many aspects of our lives we don't maybe think about at first sight. So my question is, and I first want to ask the Europeans on this panel, do we have sufficient reporting on algorithms?
No.
Not yet, but I think it is changing right now. I think with, for example, self-driving cars, with the Facebook scandal, with more and more topics with the scoring system in China, for example. I think the public gets towards these topics more and more right now, and we as journalists have to keep up with that. We have to build strong networks, to get the skills on board, or to team up and join forces with scientists, for example, and NGOs who can bring in those skills. But in fact, I mean, given the actual the capacities that newsrooms are having right now, and the data teams that are working in newsrooms in Europe, we might not have the sufficient teams on board yet.
Does everybody know what China is doing, by the way? No. So China is composing a social score for your engagement through social platforms, and that score effectively determines whether you get certain government services. So they're effectively taking your engagement score and turning it into something they can use to deny you government services. So there was an episode of Black Mirror that was all about that, and I feel like they watched it and they thought, that's a great idea. We should do that.
I mean, and this is affecting society right now, and it is changing things, and I think we in Europe are now in a stage where we can control algorithms, or we can do something about that and prevent such systems to be implemented here. So,
I hope so.
I think regarding China, this has changed really things already in society.
So about Europe, I think, as Mathew already said, no, we don't have the same capacities at the moment like the United States. Jeff and we talked yesterday, and I think the issues, they're starting with education. They're starting with the training of journalists, because the training of journalists in the United States, perhaps Jeff wants to talk a bit more about that, but it's already rather data-driven. And in Europe, especially in the German-speaking countries, it's by far not that data-driven. So it starts with the training, and then it comes to the newsrooms, because in the moment when newsrooms would say, hey, we would want to hire, I think the schools would change their curriculum, but we're not at the point where when you're a data scientist, a journalist and a data scientist, you will get hired. So I see the tragedy where we even have freelancers in that field, and they are often freelancers, or sometimes freelancers, because they have more time to focus on the projects they find interesting. Because the thing is, not every newsroom has a data scientist or a journalist who is also coder, and sometimes we have the weird situation that those journalists, those those mixtures of journalists and data scientists, they are working on very short-term projects in the newsrooms, and those are often not the interesting projects. So you need to have time for such investigations, and if the newsroom does not grant you enough time, you will not get that. And then there's one last aspect. I think perhaps it's different in Germany, but I can say it for Austria. We also have problems getting the data. Because, for example, in Austria, we don't have a Freedom of Information Act. And many things that ProPublica does, we could not do in Austria, because you can send a letter, but they will say no. And it's not the computer that says no, it's the state official that says no. So I also think that it's changing in Europe, but I don't think that we are in a financial situation where it's easy to change. And then also there are on several layers, big problems how to really get there.
I think the FOI question is something we should discuss later. I have another question regarding how to convince the newsroom to hire people in Europe. So I asked a rather naive question yesterday to Jeff if there is interest in the audience reading these pieces on algorithms, because that might be one of the most convincing arguments to hire people who can do these stories. So can you tell a little bit about the impact?
Yes.
And how the perception in the audience is?
So when I look back, I think as of last Friday, the machine bias article was still in the top 10 most read on our site, and that article published like 2 years ago. So there is a huge interest in stories right now about algorithms and the way they're shaping our lives. But what happens so often in algorithmic reporting is we lose sight of the impact on the ground. Yeah. So we write, and I'm very guilty of this because I'm not a very good writer, and not a very good storyteller. But we write, fantastic narratives about how we got the data and how we're hero journalists, and we sued the government, blah blah blah, and here's our findings, right? But to actually connect this to human impacts is what we did with both the risk scores and the car insurance. Finding people that are affected by these decisions. The thing that I will say in regard to resources, it is very difficult to do a machine bias or a risk scores or a car insurance investigation. Both of those took 6 months and many therapy sessions. And lots of legal help and outside data science help. But the other thing that I will say is these algorithms are making decisions, right? And those decisions have real world impact. And it's almost a little bit easier understanding the nature of the algorithm. Like all algorithms, like all human judgment, make mistakes. It's not this black box that is just math. And so finding the mistakes, finding the impact of those mistakes is something that we're really good at as journalists, right? We've trained ourselves, we have a profession that's trained itself to find those mistakes in, a bar over drinks or in dinners with sources. But the cool part about reporting on about algorithms and algorithmic accountability is the outputs are usually visible. Right, you can see them in your news feed. You can see them when bot accounts take over a hashtag. You can see the impact of somebody who is denied car insurance. You can see the impact of somebody who gets a high risk score, who is an upstanding citizen, and to some degree, you can do a fancy scientific white paper that does fancy regressions and crazy math. Or you can go and talk to the people who are upstanding citizens who have, been, scored as risky and don't have access to services that they need. And both ways are equally valid. If we get a thundering herd of the latter, of the impacts of these algorithms, stuff's gonna change.
I think that's a really good point. There are data nerds, I'm not naming any names, who enjoy the process and are impressed by the data. And then there are lots of people whose eyes glaze over when you start talking about algorithms. And I think I learned something from this panel I didn't know about Algorithmic. That's a fascinating story. But a lot of people, the word algorithm means nothing. So they have no idea what you're talking about. And I think if you can deconstruct it and say, look, forget about the word, forget about data, forget about regressions or what, just this is the impact. This is what these things are doing. Companies like Facebook control them, the government controls them, and they're making decisions that affect your life, decisions you aren't even aware are occurring behind the scenes, preventing you from getting insurance, getting you arrested for certain things. Those are the things that people care about.
Yeah, and perhaps we also should not think about algorithmic reporting to be really detailed reporting on every decision-making step that the algorithm really does. I mean, we have to focus on the basic principles, and I think we should compare those principles to the way we would, as humans, make decisions. And if we got a bad gut feeling about something like ethical questions or stuff like that, then we should think about how can we implement this into an algorithm, really. I mean, of course, we need those data nerds or data teams like ours to disclose things and to write about the principles behind algorithms, but we also need the strong stories beforehand. I would really, state that.
And I think that's why partnerships are so important. You can have teams that spend the 6 months and do the hard work and come up with the data, and then maybe other people help tell the story or show why it's important.
I also think I want to add that Jeff said that algorithms are visible, but I think algorithms are visible and invisible at the same time. For example, like for you and I guess for us who are really into this topic, it's like, interesting. Why is this site showing me this? Or why is this computer showing me such a different Google search result than yesterday when I was at work? Things like that. But I think we need to get to the point where like the normal user has the same thoughts. And as you mentioned, the word algorithm, unfortunately, it's like the killer of attention. It's like you say algorithms and it's over. And for example, I was at the conference for teachers like last year, and I often talk about these effects of Facebook's algorithm and these problems. And I would say, when you have a Facebook profile, you don't see everything and software and blah, 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 blah. And I give my whole keynote, and at the end, the teacher comes to me and asks me, what do you mean by Facebook doesn't show me anything? Yeah. What does that mean? And I was like, okay, so even though I explained it, you see, you have to go even deeper. So I think, to be honest, I wished we would find a better word for algorithm, a word that is easily understood. Yeah. Like, of course, if you can always say it's how the software decides for you, but perhaps we can come up with a better word.
Okay, we take suggestions.
Yeah. I think when you're looking at real-world implications, I've had great success with telling members of my family that if you search for airplane flights on a site and you're in incognito mode, you will get different results than if you search when you're logged in. That has an impact on how much you pay for an airplane flight. And I've converted people to, I need to go into incognito mode and then do a search. I didn't have to tell them the algorithm is assuming certain things about them, just that there was this real-world impact to not doing it.
We spent 6 months on airline flights too.
Thank you for doing that.
It's very hard to prove. I'll just point that out.
I spent 10 minutes.
What also helped in our case with the ProPublica project on the Facebook ads was just to ask the users for some data, but also to give them something back immediately. And this were the ads they are not seeing at the moment. Like, okay, you donate or you spend some of your data to us, but at the same time you can gain insights that you would otherwise not get. And I think this really has an effect if we can set up such experimental designs where we have some crowdsourcing aspect, but also can show them what other people see.
I think what is also important, why this topic is so interesting, even though in the general population, is all the election we've had. And
Yeah.
I'm not just talking about the United States.
Me too.
You mentioned your ad targeting tool. I work together with Who Targets Me. It's like the alternative to your software. And we have more than 1,000 users in Austria, who installed the plugin.
It's not you.
And, you know, we had an election last year, and most of the ads that political parties ran were really boring, like really, really boring. So this was good and bad in the same way, like you could not always explain why it's so important. But then we had a scandal of anonymous Facebook sites which were not saying who is behind it. And it was, for example, an advice of a political party of the Social Democrats. And they had a fake site where they tried to have a smear campaign against the other candidate. And when that whole thing blew up and became public, we were the ones having the data how they had targeted people. And it helped really show that they had put a lot of money into it, that they had specifically targeted fans of this politician who was being smeared at, who was being made, you know, he was called a liar, he was being disgraced. So we then didn't talk much about the software behind it, but without the software, we would have known much less.
I want to come back to one point. What you said, Mathew, was very encouraging. You said you don't even understand how they work. So that means that I could also start reporting.
I'm not that smart.
Nor am I, but it's good to know. So everybody in this room, if he or she were interested, could start reporting on these topics. So I would be interested in which kind of training and which kind of teams do you need within the newsrooms and which skills. So if somebody here is a decision maker in a newsroom, what would she or he, which kind of people or teams would she or he hire? I would like to
we need
know
a
a
lot
little
more
bit about this, some tips.
We need a lot more people like Jeff, that's for sure. Fewer people like me.
I think, you know, there's fundamentally two levels of reporting on algorithms, right? There's the anecdotal stuff that I just kicked out, right? Which is find people who are impacted by algorithmic decisions, right? And then there's the other part where we're gonna go into a bunker for 6 months and collect and clean data that not everybody can do, right? Both of those, however, I wanna point out, don't require you to understand what the algorithm actually is. In our car insurance example, I could form an actuary company. I sort of know how car insurance is priced, but it doesn't really matter in the end what algorithm they're using, right? Really, and in machine bias, the algorithm that they were using was just an off-the-shelf sort of thing. There are really only like a handful of these things that people can use to make these decisions, and it doesn't matter. You can't hold somebody accountable because they used a regression and they didn't use a decision tree, right? What actually matters in the end is where those algorithms break down. Now, this is a benefit for us as journalists because by their very definition, it's the same way with human judgment, by their very definition, algorithms are going to break down because what people don't understand, and this is what I want you all to take away, is that algorithms output a likelihood, right? So they output a chance that this is true. And what humans do, we think in binary, right? We think that it's either this or that, right? So when people make these scoring algorithms or tune the Facebook news feed, they pick a threshold. They say either it's going to be more than 50% likely, that means this guy's coming back to jail. At 50%, that's a coin toss, right? And we're impacting people's lives at a coin toss. So finding the examples where that breaks down, in addition to doing the heavy lift data reporting and hiring people that can do the data reporting or have the space to do it, is important. And I think that, you know, as somebody who's about to start running his own newsroom, which is crazy, and I'll talk to anybody about it if they want to hear, I think we need to invest more in that sort of expertise. in the collecting the data, especially now, right? The time where you were able to, for a lot of the stories, where you were able to sit down and get 2 or 3 anecdotes and write a story based on some source, that time only works for like Seymour Hersh, right? or the Mathew. Yeah, and he's wrong a lot of the time. So I should have chosen Mathew. The rest of us down on the ground are gonna need to start relying on data skills more and more and more. Because the cool part about data is it's not just one anecdote, it's 10,000, right? And then you can do testing. Now, I know how to do all of this stuff, but I only know how to do all of this stuff because I've been doing it for 10 years, and I have a stable of people who are smarter than me backing me up. So I always take a first stab at it, and I send it to my my statistics buddy, who I've been buddies with for a year, and say, how did I mess this up? How did I screw this up? And he's like, Jeff, not again. Come on, get your shit together. And he tells me how to fix it. So I still have source relationships with people that are smarter than me, helping me analyze the outputs of these algorithms.
So there are lots of skills I think that newsrooms need. I'm going to say that all of those are really important, but the one thing that newsrooms need the most are managers, bosses who are willing to experiment, who are willing to do projects that take a long time, who are willing to put in sort of the effort, and who are just willing to sort of test out hypotheses. Is Fafa in this room? I saw him tweeting. Fafa, are you here? Okay, so Fafa was a student in Turin. He and some, hey, there he is. So their project, the project you worked on, I thought was fascinating, trying to get people to basically track what Facebook was showing you and not showing you. So getting people to kind of volunteer to create a sort of dashboard, a way of looking inside the algorithm. What is it excluding? What is it including? A way of sort of pulling back the curtain. Now that's, not deep science, not far more on the experimental end of things, but just an attempt to kind of get at what is the impact of that on what people are seeing. Because I think that's, it's easy to lose sight of those things, but that's the real end game, is to talk to people about what they're missing, what they're seeing, how their sort of view of the world is being shaped. And Fafa, you can tell people about more of that later, if you want. No, later. Fine, put your hand up. Put your hand up.
Where?
Yeah, so that's Fafa, he can tell you all about it.
Yeah, I also think that we need those data teams as kind of interfaces or APIs for such topics for those people in the background that you have described. Like we need more experts to support us in these projects, and we also need more like project managers in the newsroom, because these are long-term projects. You need a really, really good planning for that. There are different steps. First, you have to gather data. You have to call for participation, for example. Then you will find false positives. Then there have to be a good, you have to have a good reporter then, really with a good storytelling to get more people involved. And so I think these are new projects, and we have to change our culture a little bit to get them running.
To be honest, I think that the problem is that we have already an idea what journalism is like, and this is the biggest problem here. I think that I often wonder what would journalism be like if we would not have journalism already, and nobody would have an idea what a newsroom looks like, because I think if you would start from scratch, the traditional journalists be the absolute minority. And then you would have the data people, different types of data people.
I don't like that idea.
Yeah, we too are like, we are the outsiders there, and the people who don't know that much, but write it up. But then you need the programmers, you need the people for visualization. So you have a different skill set, and I think that traditional media companies are perhaps too slow for that. Not for some projects, I think they do good stuff, but I think it's no wonder that this reporting is done by ProPublica, which is a rather new entity, or that you are starting a new startup on a journalistic level. In the German-speaking countries, Republik, I would say, is one of the most digitally advanced or like at least savvy probably newsrooms. I think it's much easier to do that when you start from scratch, because not doing that is the bigger problem. And just one thought. I think the reporting needs to change then as well. You'll have the normal story, but behind the normal story you need to have the in-depth story for the scientific communities, for the geeks, for the people who really want to know it, and also be able to see if you messed up or if you didn't mess up. So this is also very different to traditional journalistic thinking, because you don't talk about such issues in older or more traditional newsrooms.
But you should.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you. I was so excited about starting from scratch, and we have somebody on the panel who will start from scratch. But we will do a little cliffhanger here, because I see that some people in the audience have questions. So we make a round of questions, and then we are very curious about hearing what is the new exciting thing.
All right.
Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I'm Claudio Agosti. I'm one of the authors of technology that do, again, an algorithm of Facebook analysis. I worked with Fafa about it. This is a technology that has something in common with Who Targets Me, or has something in common with the ProPublica extension. So this is exactly what we are calling about the complexity we have to deal when we are reporting on algorithm. There is a technical complexity, analysis, statistics, and then reporting. I call for some specialization. It's just an exhausting way of doing, having different groups that do their own technology, that they have to do their own advocacy to have people adopt a browser extension, and struggle all around the same problem, which is Facebook is changing the HTML structure, and we have to do the same kind of fix in order to catch up with the last update of Facebook. The goal at the end is enabling reporter, analyst, and researcher to understand how the algorithm is behaving. But if specialization can say something, we have to collaborate in the technology and make an infrastructure that can be used by every researcher or every journalist, also without their technical knowledge. So that is somehow what I'm looking forward to have, because in this moment we're just struggling and be less effective against a model that is the one of Facebook or Google, that technologically will be always major than us, no? So please collaborate.
I would support that.
Yeah, our
Please collaborate.
extension is open source, and everybody can help out if they want.
But the point is not really the code, it's the amount of users.
Sure.
If the user are the amount of visibility you can have over the social graph. We need to put together this infrastructure, otherwise we will have just 3 different small groups.
Agreed.
That's a good point.
Over there, please. Yeah. Can we have the micro here? The lady with the black.
Hi.
I have you on my...
One very quick comment and then one question. The very quick comment is I couldn't agree more that we sort of have to get over the embarrassment of talking about algorithms without knowing what algorithms are. It's sort of like artificial intelligence or machine learning, or a couple of years ago, the Internet of Things. We knew as intelligent people that we had to know what we were talking about, but we didn't really know what we were talking about. So I think that's actually a big part of what the journalism writing aspect needs to do. And then my question is one, maybe it's one for Jeff or any of you, but what's worrisome about algorithms is the bias, right? And you know, when it comes to Facebook, we know that there's a kind of bias to optimize for the outcome that Facebook wants, right? Which is like a commercial outcome. But what about the bias of those kind of off-the-shelf algorithms that you were talking about, Jeff? You know, whose fault is that? Like, who's to be blamed for the bias of algorithms?
It's hard, right? Because it's hard because in every single one of the stories that I talked about, outside of maybe the NSA, no, even the NSA, there's no twirling mustache. No one in the car insurance industry is like, oh, we're just going to charge black people more, right? The people who made the risk assessment algorithm fundamentally thought they were going to solve a problem of biased judges, right? And biased parolees, and they also were going to streamline the our overbroad over-restrictive criminal justice system, right? And make it so that people could do more with less. The problem is that in that instance, what they checked is they checked to see if the algorithm was making was correct most of the time across races. But as we know, there are two ways to be wrong. There's the way where you say someone's more dangerous than they're not, and there's the way where you say someone is not dangerous and they go out on a murdering spree, right? Criminal justice agencies are interested in not letting those guys go. And they're fundamentally in the United States interested in innocent until proven guilty. So innocence until proven guilty in the United States is fundamental to our entire legal system. And this algorithm was inadvertently saying that African Americans were, for half of the time when it guessed that they were dangerous, it was saying that they were guilty before they were proven innocent.
Because it's hard to build something like that into an algorithm. Innocent until proven guilty is not something you can input into an algorithm.
Yeah, exactly. And it requires a lot of human judgment, and human judgment is fallible, but you can explain the reasoning.
But I also think, I think one issue is efficiency. So I think what Jeff's talking about, if it's the insurance industry, if it's the NSA, if it's the government, they're trying to do things faster. They're trying to do things with fewer people. They're trying to cut costs. And so they outsource things to an algorithm. So they say, well, we'll just let the computer decide. And not everyone, obviously, but I think there's a certain amount of, if you want to call it laziness, or there's a push for more efficiency. Efficiency means getting rid of people. And the best way to get rid of people is to use an algorithm. And so then then, like I said, you can wave at the algorithm. You can be like, I didn't make that decision. The algorithm made that decision. And they're always right.
Just one, or please, Jeff, if thank you.
Yeah, just a follow-on to that. What I find in my reporting again and again and again is that it depends on what the algorithm is optimizing for, right? So the algorithm in the risk scores was optimizing for equality across groups. It doesn't matter how the decision is made, just that it makes relatively the same right decision at the same amount of time. In the car insurance example is a little bit more complicated. It's not that someone was sitting down and saying, let's rate these zip codes that are heavily African American more. Actually, what they were doing is they were optimizing for market forces. In the United States, African American and minority neighborhoods are poorer, so they buy cheaper insurance. When they buy cheaper insurance, you have to jack the price up to equalize costs, right? So it's a market force thing that they're optimizing for, not the difference in risk, which is the idea behind insurance. And that's sort of like the original sin. Yeah. So understanding, when you're reporting on algorithms, understanding what they're optimizing for, in Facebook's example, they're optimizing for likes or clicks, to the detriment of these other things, is a very good framework to start thinking about algorithms and how to do this algorithmic reporting.
Also, I think that there are other real problems we have to look at, and it's not just bias. I think bias is the most creepy one. It's like the one where you really don't want to. But I think there's also the question if some algorithms are just crappy. If they're like really not well programmed, or they're having mistakes in themselves. For an example, in many countries all over the world, if you get a loan, there's the algorithmic scoring behind that. And you know so you could say there are 200 data points about a person, and this decides if you will get the loan or if you don't get the loan, how good your score is. But what happens when they don't have 200 data points about you, but only 3? And one of these data points is where you live, the other data point is your age, and then perhaps, I don't know, some other thing. They have just 3 data points about you. So there is the danger that when the algorithm is programmed crappily, in a bad way, that, for example, where you live might be too highly evaluated. Then you live perhaps in a suburb out of Perugia where people are rather poor. Suddenly you don't get the credit, you don't get the loan because your score is too low. And this is, I think we don't just need to talk about bias. We also need to have some kind of new system where experts are rating algorithms if they're good enough for serious tasks.
I have one follow-up here for Christina, because we chatted before that, and you said that, of course, you at Spiegel Online are also developing and using algorithms.
Yeah.
And so you have some experience, what you have to...
Good ones though, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah, so can you just very short give us an idea on what you have to take care of or what the process is like?
Yeah, for example, when we are supporting our sports department with data journalistic tools and applications, we have developed like tactics boards. It's an interactive graphic that shows you or gives you an overview about one soccer match and the average position of every player and the networks of the passes they are playing or they have been played. So yeah, we produce this automatically, but of course there might be some cases that we did not test or train the system for. So we have to just really look at the system and every outcome and just be very careful with that. I mean, another possible way would also be to do a little testing with NGOs or partners, just to hand them over your algorithms that you have been developing, because I mean we want to have transparency ourselves, so we should also be open about them, and we should publish them on GitHub, for example, and we did that just to give everyone the chance to check. Yeah.
So it seems to be a good opportunity to get to know what you have to look at if you do it yourself. Okay. Yeah. There's a question. Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry about this, Ms. Dispiace. I'm a child at a graduate level course. This has been fascinating. But in 30 seconds or less, can each of the panel give me and any of the other children here websites that we can go to quickly? So targetme.com, which I think our Austrian colleague recommended, but simple, quick things that we can use. Please.
What is really great is algorithmtips.org. It's algorithmtips.org by Nick Diakopoulos. It's a great website full of examples, mainly in the US, but you can learn so many things from them.
And actually, Nick Diakopoulos, who runs it, you should follow him if you're interested in this at all. Nick Diakopoulos, this is all he does, research related to this stuff.
There's an organization called stats.org, which provides statistical help to journalists pro bono. They no longer answer my emails because I've used I've gone through every volunteer there. So don't mention my name.
Oh yeah. So it's called Who Targets Me, just to get the correct site, and it's a plugin in many countries. Like in the German-speaking countries, it's also all active there. And to be honest, if you're more interested in the social implications and you want to understand the drama behind it and why it's important, I think you should read everything that Zeynep Tufekci has ever. Yes. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Sorry. Zeynep Tufekci. And this is probably wrong how to pronounce it.
Has everybody heard of her?
She's the best. I think she's the best scholar.
Tufekci. So Zeynep is Z-E-Y-N-E-P, and Tufekci is T-U-F-E-K-C-I. She's a sociologist at, I can't remember the university, but she's brilliant. She's done at least one TED Talk. She wrote a book about, she's been following social media for a long time and doing research around how it functions.
We can tweet it. We can tweet it later.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Okay. like Mark Zuckerberg will follow up on that.
Yeah.
Because Zeynep follow on Zuckerberg. Milica Pešić, Media Diversity Institute. I want to go back to what Kristen and Ingrid said about the emotions. Everyone knows about Cambridge Analytica and the secret film Channel 4, British Channel 4 did about them. I'm sure you've seen it somewhere on internet when they said, we deal with emotions, with fears.
Yeah.
Facts don't matter. I heard recently at a UNESCO event that only in Europe there are right now 15,000 media literacy projects.
Wow.
So only in Europe. So all trying to educate the audience, the public, about what different media are doing. How do you, in media literacy, you are dealing with facts?
Yeah.
Cambridge Analytica and likes are dealing with emotions. So how do you then deal with, actually, we are back to ancient Greek, classic Greek, Apollonian and Dionysian, principles. Are we going to use emotions to help people understand what's happening?
That's a really great point, because again, journalists and media literacy programs and fact-checking is all really valuable. And there are people who will be convinced because they want to learn. There will be lots of people who will pay no attention. I like to compare fact-checking to the list of ingredients on the box of food, or the picture of a cancerous lung on a pack of cigarettes. That's a fact. Millions of people smoke anyway because they don't care. They fundamentally don't care. And if I'm having a discussion with my crazy uncle about Trump, my facts are irrelevant. Like, what I am saying factually does not matter. And if I say that story that you said was wrong, it was made up, there's nothing factually true in it, we are not talking the same language. So we're not going to meet, there's no way to convince him. So then how do you reach those people? You have to understand where they are coming from. What is it that is bothering them? There is something that is pushing them towards stories that are untrue. And it is emotional. And in many cases, it's things that happened decades ago. In many cases, it's things that their parents believed. These are things that cannot be solved by an algorithm tweak, cannot be solved by a media literacy program. A friend of mine said that social media fundamentally is an accelerant. It's like fuel for fires, psychological, sociological, political, cultural things that have existed for decades or centuries. Those are very, very difficult problems to solve.
And maybe journalistic storytelling comes into place at this point again, because we've seen some really great scientific work on the debunking of false facts, and the fact that only if you can tell a debunking story and you come with emotions again, you can get rid of the emotional false story that has been there in the first place. So we have to just get all our newsroom stuff together and tell emotional stories on or for the debunking of false facts and news.
But I think this is a really good question, because this is my whole work focuses on how you try to build up this space where people will fight against misinformation, and the facts are somewhat getting stronger. And to be honest, I think this is the toughest part of all of it, because I also saw this part in the Cambridge Analytica video, and I found it extremely important. So what can you do? I think part of it is already happening in many countries. We are reacting with emotions, and I think newsrooms are doing that really strongly. Like, what we are doing now is we are talking about democracy, and we're talking about values, we're talking about the other side. We say, okay, but there's a danger to our society when we do not have an informed public debate anymore. And so what all of this reporting is about building up emotion around the other side of it, about decide, do we really want to lose this well-informed debate? Are we really into it? And I think that we are here, like it's many people here, and many people listen to Mark Zuckerberg, even from Europe. I think it's changing because people are emotional, and it's again and again we have to keep on it. And if you're interested in how to do it, there is Elisabeth Wehling. She's a scientist at Berkeley. She's a linguist, and she's about its framing. It's a completely different topic, but if you want to know how you can trigger emotions and make yourself better understood, read Elisabeth Wehling. She's a German linguist. She's really great. Thank you. Wehling. Wehling.
We can tweet the two. And we have a we have one last question here, or remark.
Okay, so there's one question to Mr. Jeff Larson. A lot of the algorithmic storytelling is about bias. And so I'm from Switzerland, and for a lot of time we have been thinking about what is neutrality. What is neutrality? So I would be happy to learn if there's anything neutrality from you. And then secondly, I think I love all your ideas about data journalism and all this stuff, but I think that mic is really bad. So in 2016, we started a research in Switzerland on a company called Cambridge Analytica. And we gathered a lot of data through freedom of information requests and stuff. My main concern was not to make it a data-driven piece, but to actually make it a story. And I think that worked out really fine. I think it's actually the main challenge is to hide the data and all that elite telling about which technical methods you used. We didn't mention it at all, because this is actually not bringing it to the people, I think. It's actually, you have to hide it, because what made Silicon Valley fail so badly was the overemphasis on technology rather than social science and understanding of humanism and how people work and function. And I don't want to see that being repeated in journalism again. I think this will be ultimately a failure. Okay, thank you.
That's a cool question. The neutrality question, algorithms aren't neutral, right? Like, they're just, by their very definition, they're just not. They make decisions. One way to improve algorithms is to educate the users of the algorithm that they're outputting the likelihood. Not all algorithms are going to have noticeable bias. I want to circle back to a very good point that you made, which is, the accuracy of the algorithm matters. So in our machine bias article series about the risk assessments, we also found that there was no bias when it tried to predict violent recidivism, but it was only right 1 in 5 times, right? That is also a story. So like you have a 20% chance of it being right, but 4/5 of the people are being labeled guilty without innocence. On the second question, I think you're sort of being a little bit wishy-washy in your logic in terms of the fact that we're going to all become Twitter and Facebook and robot machine journalists. I think a large portion of what I've been saying up here is that storytelling does matter. But we have the benefit of being on the internet, and showing your methodology and showing your work is a good portion of the credibility, right? So if we're on the internet, we can run the main bar that glosses over our findings. We can run that white paper that shows exactly how we did it. He summarizes. We can show the white paper that shows exactly what we did, and that is a fundamental that is a fundamental tool that we have to be transparent and to not be like the Silicon Valley companies. The other thing that I will say is I think you probably did make the right decision with the Cambridge Analytica stories that you did. Not every story is a data story. Every story is informed by data. It hasn't been a story that I've come across in my career that couldn't have used a little bit of data or facts to back it up. But the stories that I outlined here, like any good investigative journalist, I have a bag of bad ideas that I carry around that I'm going to circle back when I have time to, right? So not every story, we talked about flights. We spent 6 months investigating sites like, Kayak for this particular bias. And there are too many inputs. There's too much outputs. There's too much noise in the data to be able to do that story, so.
Also, neutrality doesn't exist, so.
Thanks a lot. I want a very, very quick glimpse in the future. What's next? And I start with Ingrid and I finish with Jeff.
So I've been writing
No,
down.
no, I start with Ingrid.
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
You get the last word.
I don't need it.
So what I'm hopeful is that we'll see organizations like perhaps ProPublica, similar to your project, in Europe. And what I'm also hopeful is that the word algorithm will not be a killer of attention. For example, I give you one anecdote, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to tell it, but my book, it has a subtitle, and it says how fake news, populists, and uncontrolled technology is manipulating us. And I wanted to put the word technology in the algorithm in there, and my publishing house says, no, don't put the word algorithm anywhere on our cover. And I'm like, yes, but how to call it, what to call it then? And then we came up with this weird other word. And I think in 5 years, when you write a book for like normal people, it will be okay to have the word algorithm on it, and this is good. And we are in this field in between. And then there's other thing is, I think there's also something good happening. We have a debate in which it's not anymore, we are not being treated anymore as if we were all stupid. And last year I was in Perugia, we were, I think, being treated as if we were completely stupid. Because when the whole craziness about the US election broke out, there was Facebook's first answer, we are a neutral platform, and we don't want to be the arbiter of truth, which totally ignored that they are the arbiter of what people see and what people get to know as true or what they learn. And I think this is an argument Facebook is not making anymore, because they noticed people will shout out. People will say this is an insult to our intelligence, what you're saying here. And I think so we have come a long way in just 1 year. And I think because of reporting by the Spiegel or by you, Jeff, I hope that it's be even more in like a year or in 2 years, and then we'll see perhaps next year in Perugia already.
Actually, the Reuters Institute has a great term, computational propaganda, which is one of my favorite new terms. So the type of thing that Facebook does, that YouTube does, the YouTube recommendation, essentially pushing propaganda, but using algorithms to do it. I have a sort of dark view of the future where what China is doing becomes more common. There are very, very powerful forces, economic and political forces, that are pushing algorithmic control of things, either because they want to simplify or they want to cut costs, or it allows them to do away with people and use algorithms instead. And I think those are going to be making more and more decisions about our lives, not just, what memes we see in our Facebook feed, but whether we're targeted for certain things, whether the NSA sends a drone to our house, whether whether missiles work their way to our neighborhood somehow. Depending on where you live, it's going to happen faster or slower, but I think it is happening, so.
Sorry, may I add one sentence? I think we'll have algorithmic regulation in Europe. I think this is changing.
Yeah, I hope so too. And I would like to add, that one thing I think this whole debate will influence our own work and will influence how we deal with transparency about our relevance criteria, our methodology, and everything that we do. So hopefully users will be able to really get a bigger or a more detailed picture on what happens in newsrooms soon, and we will have more and more collaborations, even amongst competitors, like we had it in Germany with Süddeutsche Zeitung and NDR broadcaster, which is, usually we are in different investigative networks, so this is really something politically, and we made it, and this has been great fun. So hopefully the data journalism scene and how we work together with a very open culture will influence journalism much more.
I think in terms of platforms, I think the platforms are going to lock down API access, which will mean that we're all going to have to double down in order to see what's actually going on in there. It's going to be increasingly harder to get data out of them. So we're going to have to, beef up programming teams to build extensions. I think that we will see a dramatic increase in things like risk assessments and increased.
Is GDPR actually making it harder to get data?
Well, I don't know the answer. Maybe, I don't know. But I also think that, I think we'll just see an increase in what I like to call small algorithms that are used in daily life, alternate risk scores that are going to be completely transparent. For me, I think, I'm starting a new organization that is going to focus on investigating algorithms, and I'm going to repeat back the good ideas that we're here. So we're going to have a project manager in the newsroom. We're going to have reporters working directly with programmers, and we're going to focus on, platforms, privacy, social justice stories, small algorithms, and doing a complete sort of census of the internet in terms of privacy violations and malware and stuff like that. So.
We will be following your project with great interest. I thank you all a lot for your great questions. I thank you for the panel for your very interesting contributions. I learned a lot. I see that we have plenty of work ahead. So let's work. And we will tweet the links, and we hopefully will find a new name for the good art, Algorithmic. Thanks a lot. Have a nice afternoon.